Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Obviously, as Jeff would say, there's a ton going on, but I want to start with the COVID crisis with Laura, please.
Good morning, everyone. The disease right now is spreading so fast, and at this point, the data is devastating. As we end this week, the U.S. has added over 556 new cases since Monday. The nation is likely to hit 11 million new cases at some point in the next 4 days, which will be the fastest rate ever. The positivity rate of the country is now at 9.23%, and this is the 10th day in a row of over 100,000 cases and the third consecutive day for record hospitalizations. States are reporting shrinking ICU capacities, but also staffing shortages as well. These numbers show an explosive nationwide growth and the spread of coronavirus. And Tinker has just issued a guidance note going into the weekend as the numbers tend to decrease over the weekend, but it doesn't mean that the disease is abating. The key models that we have been tracking are predicting a high number of deaths in the newly released modeling. IHME model that came out last night predicted 439,000 deaths by March 1st, with a number as high as 587,000 deaths if states relax any mitigation. To get to that incredible number, it would mean that there would be 2,200 deaths per day. The CDC's ensemble modeling predicts the loss of 40,000 additional American lives by December 5th. Yesterday was another record day with 153,000 new cases and 919 new deaths. In states, the political divide over mitigation still continues. Science and mandates continue to rankle Republican governors and then making headlines over this. Yesterday, you had the Republican governor of Mississippi saying that if Joe Biden ultimately becomes president of the United States, that state won't participate in any sort of nationwide lockdown. South Dakota, which has a rolling positivity rate of over 20%, but the mayor of Sioux Falls broke a tie in their city council, and there won't be a mask mandate there. And with numbers spiking in Texas, the state's largest indoor water park will open, saying they will follow CDC guidelines. But two states led by Republicans, Iowa and Utah, do have mask mandates now. In Utah, the positivity rate is over 23% with record daily cases. There's a 2-week state of emergency, and we have Lucy Kavanaugh that takes us inside the stresses on the system with Utah with a really powerful piece this morning that profiles a woman who lost her mother and grandfather to coronavirus with only her father surviving. Yesterday, the mayor of Chicago issued a stay-at-home order for 30 days that will begin on Monday and a mandatory limit on gatherings to 10 people. The state is up 4% this week in its positivity rate to 14.3%. California became the second state to pass 1 million new cases after Texas earlier this week. And in Georgia, where Georgia undertakes a hand recount, the Georgia Secretary of State is under quarantine as his wife tests positive. In health headlines, Secretary Azar on CNN yesterday said targeted vaccinations could start with the most vulnerable in December, and predicting at the end of April that there will be enough for all Americans who wish to get vaccinated. And you have Dr. Fauci that said the higher efficacy rate of the vaccine could mean Americans would overcome their fear and misgivings about the safety of the vaccines. And this morning he said that the United States could turn this around and that it is not futile. And while we're weeks away from this vaccine distribution, still tons of questions about how the initial wave will be handled of the distribution. Sarah Murray files a piece on the status of that for 5 and 6 today. On all of the health headlines, we have Sanjay, Elizabeth, and Jacqueline available. On education, we have Diana Goldrigo looking at the challenges for teachers in the new school year and what does the return to the classroom really mean. And Evan McMorris-Santoro is available on the New York City state of schools, and the positivity number increases and it gets closer to the threshold to return to remote learning. And in sports, the Ivy League schools become the first NCAA division to say they're canceling winter sports and not playing the delayed fall sports in the spring season. Andy Schultz is available from the Masters to talk about these developments. For the wrap pieces today, we have Nick Watt for 3, 5, 7, and 9, and Erica Hill for 4, 6, 8, and 10. And that's where I'll pause.
Okay, Laura, thank you very much for all that. There's a lot there, obviously a lot of numbers, none of which are good. Just before I open it up to everybody, Ben just sent out a note about the numbers and some of the nuance in numbers as we go through today and the weekend and into Monday. Ben, are you on, Ben?
I am.
Yeah, can you just offer that guidance to everybody on the call, just in terms of dealing with the numbers as we see them in the next few days?
Sure. So we have seen some weekend records in the past, and certainly anything can happen at this point. But I would just caution everyone that as we get into the weekend, if the numbers do drop even a little bit, not to assume that that is necessarily a good thing. I would almost guarantee you they will continue to go up. They will continue to go up exponentially, but we may see some reporting lags over the weekend and then dumps of new cases and new deaths, as we get into next week. So I would just be careful on that. Second note, when reporting on cases and deaths, they are cases and deaths reported on a certain day. I just want to make sure that we all are really careful not to suggest that X number of people died yesterday. We don't know that, and I would guarantee you they did not die yesterday because it takes time to get these cases reported. And then just a third, real quick, all of the data changes all the time. This happens as Johns Hopkins goes through and figures out that cases were, actually happened on a certain day, reported on a different day, or to my earlier point, that people died on, one day versus another day. So even with the notes that we send out and that the NCC sends out about records, they are all subject to change all the time. So please check the elements of it before you report.
All right. Thank you very much, Ben. Obviously, there's a huge economic component to this and discussion about the stimulus and what the status of that is, and also, the president is meeting, having his first official event, it feels like, since the election, and excluding the visit to Arlington National Cemetery today on Operation Warp Speed. So we'll get more on those things from Washington. But before we do, on the virus itself and all of these alarming numbers and how they're impacting people in the entire country, I'd just like to open it up to anybody who has any other thoughts, questions, concerns. Anyone on coronavirus? Okay.
I'll just add real quickly, Michael, just, as a harbinger of what's to come, we sort of talking just to underscore it, and Sanjay has said this on the air many times. It's really the hospitalizations that we should be watching. And if you look at the trends from the COVID tracking project, they are nothing short, of frightening, even by the standards that we're talking about things today. More than 67,000 people hospitalized. Hospitalizations, as we know, lag, about a month behind the cases. So you look at where cases were a month ago, and we were all scared about that at the time, and you look at where the daily cases are now, fast forward a month, and you can only use your worst imagination, as far as where we're going to be. So that's definitely something to focus on. Yeah,
thank you for that, Ben. And of course, you can further break that down into ICU beds available, and which is and amplifies whether or not localities are able to even manage the most serious cases if they are overrun with cases and ICU beds are disappear, and there's no place to put these people or take care of them properly. They have learned a lot about how to, as we know, how to care for people who have coronavirus, and that's why they've been able to do much better with treatments and things as they've gone along. But if they don't have the space and the machines and the drugs and everything else to handle the number of people they're dealing with, obviously that's a huge issue. Why don't we go to Washington now? We'll get to politics after, but why don't we go to Washington? This stuff, the president, stimulus, et cetera.
Okay, so you mentioned that the president has a 12 o'clock event today. It's Operation Warp Speed. Currently it is closed. We'll see if that opens up. But given the outlined, we've had a president who is tweeting about every single grievance, nothing about COVID, nothing about the 6 American service members killed yesterday, and while all of these things are going on. Just in terms of stimulus, I'm not sure there's any new developments except for the fact that stimulus is not going anywhere. And Richard will get into the remarks Powell made yesterday about how bad this economy is. In terms of the 68 days that are left, it is unclear how much longer the president is going to drag this out. As we all know, we haven't seen him in over a week now, and people are pointing at the November 20th Georgia recount date as a possible end to all of this, but he's the president and this could change at any moment. Our reporting yesterday about the kids and how they're split, And this all comes in terms of an increasingly difficult real-world landscape for him. David will talk about calling Arizona. We have this group of federal state officials coming out overnight saying this is the most secure election in American history. There's no evidence of any voting systems were compromised, and this being distributed by the DHS. And then on Capitol Hill, the GOP breaking on President-elect Biden getting these briefings. Langford, today is the day that he said by which, if they don't start giving them to him by today, he'll intervene. We are on really close watch for the removal of CIA Director Haskell today. We're reporting that she's on thin ice, and this all goes to settling scores over the Russia investigation. Also, the head of cybersecurity, who has been tweeting, constantly debunking the conspiracy theories of Trump. So we're looking for him. And then obviously we have Ray, who is also on this list, and we're watching closely. I just also want to mention, Drew Griffin has a piece for later today about Stop the Steal as a Republican battle cry. It wasn't created because of 2020. It was initially a fundraising website Roger Stone came up with in 2016. So he has a really good look of this, about this Stop the Steal movement. And I think that's where we start.
Okay, thank you. And that Drew Griffin piece will be great. Looking forward to that one. On the stimulus front, just two things I want to note. If you saw Christine Romans this morning, there are 12 million people out in the country who are eligible to have received stimulus checks that have not received them yet because they maybe perhaps haven't filed for them or the IRS can't find them. And the deadline is rapidly approaching for those people. And then the second part is that you would presume that the Biden team doesn't want an economic disaster. Well, they're going to have an economic issue, but they don't want it to get worse before they get there. And thus you would assume that there might be pressure from them on Nancy Pelosi and others to make some kind of deal with the Republicans in the Senate to get something through to help at least ease some of the economic hardships that people are facing as Biden comes in January. So it seems strange, at least to me personally, that they wouldn't be doing everything they could to try to smooth the path for Biden so that some of the economic stuff is dealt with before he gets into office. So I think that's worth keeping an eye on and talking about. Let's open it up to all. Virginia obviously talked about a lot of different things, including the DHS stuff on the election security, people potentially being fired, et cetera, et cetera. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts about any of the stuff that she just raised?
Michael, Trump and his Republican enablers are now putting American lives at risk, and I think we should try to spell out how that is. And it's really in two kind of obvious categories. Every day the Biden coronavirus team can't meet with their counterparts at HHS and the CDC and the coronavirus task force, they are slowing down Biden's ability to fight the virus, speed up the vaccine distribution, and get their arms around it. And that's going to cost lives. So this is not just about the president's ego or whatever it is he's doing. This is actually putting lives at risk. And then the other category of national security, we talked about the PDB, but the 9/11 Commission also said that a major problem in 2000 was that President Bush couldn't get his team in place because we know security clearances take a long time. So, Senator Langford is saying, well, he should get the PDB, but that's really not even a tiny step. The delay in certifying Biden as the president-elect is keeping his team from getting their security clearances started so that on January 20th, he's going to have a shell of a team because they won't be cleared in because it takes a long time. These two things put Americans' lives at risk, and Republicans are enabling.
Thank you, Sam. I don't think there could be anything more important said than what Sam just did. The number one job of the president is to protect American citizens. And again, as Collinson wrote, as we discussed yesterday on the call, right now he has abdicated that responsibility, and It's not only distressing and concerning, but extremely dangerous. And for the reasons that Sam just laid out, and others, that people are not being protected as they should. And so we certainly can't talk about that enough. Does anybody have anything else related to any of these topics?
Hey, Michael, it's Cynthia. You know, I think that as I'm hearing all of this and kind of adding it all up, yesterday, just to check it out, I was horrified. I saw Laura Ingraham basically spend an entire show telling everybody that they should not allow anyone to take away their rights and not wear masks, basically, not listen to Biden, who wanted to take away their freedoms. The show was horrific. I mean, it was terrifying. And she had somebody, the guests were horrific from the Discovery Institute, which, you know, is the creationism people. It was how our freedoms were going to be taken away. It was a scare tactic show. And I'm just wondering if, you know, if we're going to call out not only what the administration is doing to not allow this process that's necessary to protect us, but if we're going to call out, I mean, would we not be smart to say, now is the time to call out all of the enablers who are creating this disinformation campaign, who are scaring Americans and creating all this confusing messaging? I mean, I don't know if maybe it's a special, maybe it's you know, let's get the facts straight for everybody and call them out. I mean, I don't know if we've done that as you know, as directly as Sam is mentioning right now. Like here's who is stopping things. Here's the people that are saying all the lies directly. Here are the people that are giving you misinformation. And I'm horrified at how people are getting all kinds of mixed messages, and that's what's creating the chaos.
Yes, all good points, Cynthia. I would say that we are doing an extensive amount of that, starting with the media team, Brian Felter, Oliver Darcy. They are writing about this and appearing on television constantly to talk about this and the disinformation. We're doing it in other ways in our shows as well. We need to continue to keep doing that. We need to continue to, debunk conspiracy theories and debunk things that are actually contributing to the risks and dangers that Americans face, as opposed to protecting them. So yeah, we need to continue doing all of that. I agree. And as we've noted many times, Fox News can be a very dangerous entity in terms of both the country and the people that live in it.
I mean, I was shocked that I was shocked that on the day of 144,000 cases, she was basically telling people, don't listen, don't wear a mask. I couldn't believe it.
The other piece of that is Marcus. The other piece of that, I totally agree. The other piece of that is, Alito was out there yesterday, the Supreme Court Justice, giving the kind of intellectual reasoning behind, how it's an abrogation of our freedoms. So it is mind-boggling, but, there's that intellectual aspect of it too. And Fox is the populist, underpinning of that intellectual argument. But it is super dangerous and happening in kind of every sphere of the conservative sphere in America.
I totally agree, which is why we have to tell people based on facts what they need to know, which is why people like Sanjay and the other doctors that we have in on our air regularly are so important to continue to tell people what they really need to do and how they really need to protect themselves. And as we know, the CDC has actually been increasing its number of recommendations to protect themselves, how people can protect themselves. The one thing we haven't heard is from the president or the vice president. Maybe we will today after Operation Warp Speed meeting. I don't know, but it would certainly make a big difference in a lot of places in the country if the president and the vice president would come out and express some continued guidance on how people can protect themselves and what people need to do to stop this. Anybody else?
Michael,
on this stuff?
Yeah, it's Ben again. If I could just add real quick, just on the framing of this, Fox is, I do think we've been doing a really good job pushing back against this noise and this disinformation from Fox and others. I think we could probably frame this a little better as not taking away people's freedoms, with masks. We are giving them the means by which to protect themselves and telling people what to do, wear a mask, social distance, et cetera, et cetera. That is better than giving people a vaccine. And that is what we are doing. That is what the CDC is doing, with in a country where we have science that we can share with people to help them live, healthier, better lives. And I think that's a better way to frame it, as the other side of it frames it as taking away freedom, enabling you to protect yourself and your family.
Yep, and the CDC on masks and saying it actually protects you as well as others this week was really important. And just a note on that front, Ben, that's what the president-elect is doing every time he appears. So there's a change coming in terms of how this will all be framed, but 68 days away, or whatever the number is now, 67 days away, it would help the country if there could be a message delivered from people in power before that time. Why don't we move on?
Hey, Michael, sorry, just one quick thing. I just want to go back to something that Laura started with on the call. And I know we covered it on New Day about the Utah governor and apparently the Iowa governor as well are now, enacted mask mandates. I think we really need to really follow up with these Republican governors who are just probably just trying to toe the line with, and follow in Trump's, messaging. And now, because of the devastation going on in their states, they're having to change their policies. And I think we should follow up with, all of the other Republican governors and anybody else who's refused to enact these mask mandates, because, clearly that's, as you just said, it's the only thing people can do short of being in full lockdown without a vaccine.
Yep, I think it's really important to continue to follow up with the governors and do that. And you hear people like Governor DeWine on our air talk about this in Ohio. They're very important voices in this. I totally agree. Thank you. Let's move to politics now. David?
Good morning, Club. Most of the major political storylines of where we are. So I just things to dig through here. We called Arizona for Biden last night, obviously adding 11 electoral votes to his tally at 290, and Georgia stay in his column. That'll go up to 306. Of course, the exact number Donald Trump won 4 years ago. There's no publicly planned Biden schedule today, as he remains at his Rehoboth Beach house, but he is going to meet with his transition advisors. Vice President-elect Harris is also meeting with advisors in D.C., but again, we don't expect at this moment to see either of them today. But if folks are doing the Arizona thing, I should just note, if you didn't catch Cindy McCain on New Day, there's some really good sound there that could help with that story. Ron Klain, the incoming White House Chief of Staff, gave his first interview since being named so last night. I think there were two key elements out of that interview. One, he talked about the COVID coordinator that is going to have direct daily access to Biden in the Oval and brief him daily. And also, on day one of the Biden administration, they're going to put a mask mandate in place where the federal government can actually effectuate that and encourage states and localities to do the same. As you said, a different framing coming on January 20th. He also said that Biden has spoken with some Republicans, but not McConnell. That will come when McConnell drops the enabling bit of Trump and acknowledges that the election is over, but they have not spoken yet. You saw the news that China congratulated Biden on his victory, adding to the big powers around the world that have done so. President Obama's memoir, Promised Land, the book tour, the interview process of the book tour began, and CBS released that 60 Minutes clip with Scott Pelley, where Obama talked about this current state of affairs and said that the baseless vote fraud claims are motivated in part because the president doesn't like to lose and never admits loss. But Obama went on to say that he's more troubled by the fact that other Republican officials who he says know better go along with this and humor him in some fashion. It's not just delegitimizing the Biden administration. He said it's delegitimizing democracy in general, and that's dangerous. So that sound out there from President Obama. In the Georgia Senate runoffs, Kyung La is going to take a look for you back tonight at just how intense, how negative, how expensive this has already gotten. The ads are flying and the money is flowing in pretty significant fashion. Over some $55 million has already been reserved on the airwaves for the next few weeks through the end of December, or towards the end of December. Obviously more to come after that, since it's not until January 5th. But this just is the center of the political universe, and every outside group and all these politicians who want to be helping their party for battle control of the United States Senate just is descending upon Georgia, and it is a flurry of political activity there. So Kyung's going to capture all of that. I just wanted to mention some bizarre comments coming from the newly elected Republican senator from Alabama, Tommy Tuberville, the former football coach who's replacing Democrat Doug Jones. He made some comments about his father's service in World War II and the defeat of socialism instead of fascism. And he talked about the three branches of government being the executive, the House, and the Senate. He also may have been making some fundraising calls at the temporary Senate office. So there's just a whole bunch of stuff out there on Tuberville that suggests perhaps he's not quite ready for prime time. And folks may want to take a look at that. And I think that is where we start.
Okay, just a couple quick notes, and I didn't know you were ending on that before we open it up. I didn't know you were ending on that, but I will note for people, if anybody is doing the Tuberville thing, you should check out his answer on what the Voting Rights Act is during the campaign when he was asked to talk about the Voting Rights Act. Go back and find that answer. And then you may be less surprised that he doesn't know what the branches of government are and some of the other notes that David pointed out. It's absolutely outrageous that somebody like this can get elected, but it's happened before, like in 2016. So just check it out. But the lack of knowledge and understanding of actually what they have been elected to and how the government works, what the Voting Rights Act is, et cetera, it's just fairly incredible. Two other quick notes on what David brought up. The Obama sound, we've used it a bunch of times. We should continue to use that. It's really important, I think. The last part of what David said about that all of this is not just delegitimizing the Biden administration, but also democracy in general, and it's very dangerous. And I think that we've talked a lot about that, but I think it's important. And hearing from the former president on this is another key piece of the conversation. And then just one other note on the transition, as we've heard from Ron Klain, some sound from Ron Klain in the interview we did last night, and the transition continues to move forward despite all the obstacles. And we should do our best to continue to treat it as we would in any other transition period where, we do keep it moving forward. Who's going to be Secretary of State? Who's going to be Secretary of Defense? Who's going to be Attorney General? What are the plans for Biden on day one? What are his plans on coronavirus? What are his plans on the economy? And treat all of that in not a totally normal fashion, because there's nothing normal about 2020, but just continue to tell that story as we would be if the president had already conceded and Biden was moving in to take over the government fully in 2 months. Anything from anybody on politics or anything that's been talked about so far?
Yeah, Michael, I just wanted to continue the discussion about the clear and present danger that these false allegations might be doing to the country. And I know it sounds like a overstatement, but I watched Rudy Giuliani on with Lou Dobbs last night, and it shook me to the core. I would think that maybe, and John Avon listens to this call, and he used to work for Rudy, maybe someone like John or somebody else would take what Rudy did last night and deconstruct it to show how damaging what he did is. And I'm sure it's shared throughout the conservative ecosystem because people are believing what Rudy is saying and others are saying, that there was a deliberate attempt to steal the election, and that sources from everywhere, from people who used to work with Maduro in Venezuela and Soros, are kind of behind this Dominion voting system sham, and that hundreds of thousands of votes in both Michigan and Pennsylvania were stolen, and we're going to prove it. Now, if we had an outside the U.S. enemy trying to divide America, we would be focusing on that in spades. And this is continuing to go on, and no matter what happens after the president-elect is inaugurated, because so many millions of Americans have heard this stuff from people that they trust, not OANN, but the guy who was formerly dubbed America's mayor continues to go on and say this stuff. I know we don't like to amplify bullshit, but there needs to be something that stops this, because it's going to divide America further than it's already divided. And I think it's our obligation to do something about this.
Drew Griffin has been assigned to that, and we'll start on it as soon as he's done with today.
And if I could just jump in here, to me, the biggest issue is not just the Rudy Giuliani's and the people like that, but it is the universe of misinformation that is happening. So if you are a Republican who doesn't watch CNN and you watch Fox News and you have your Facebook feed and maybe you have Twitter, every single bit of information you are getting is one singular message, that the election was stolen from Donald Trump. And you're getting that over and over again. And then you look to your leaders in Congress, they're saying the same thing, the president's saying the same thing. Why wouldn't you believe it? It's very convincing. I think that is the danger, that it's many sources saying a similar message. It makes it different from any other kind of disinformation we've seen.
Yeah,
they are true believers, by the way. They are completely convinced, and there's no getting them out of it, because they only listen to their sources, which are red state radio. They listen to In the Matrix. They only watch Newsmax. They only listen to their sources. They live in their bubble, and they do not believe anything other than their bubble. And so getting them off of that is incredibly difficult.
So I totally agree. I would just say two things. One is, I think that all across our shows, you know, Brianna and Jake and Anderson and Chris and Don are constantly doing this. We can only do what we can do in our world, right? We can't change somebody else's world, but we are trying to tell a story that's truth and call out all of the lies and the falsehoods every single day, and usually every single hour on CNN. And that's what we can do, and that's what we are doing. So I would encourage everyone to continue to do that. We can't do anything about what Rudy Giuliani says, except if there's something important to call it out and debunk or tell why it's untrue or why it's false. My second note is that Rick is one of only 4 people watching Fox Business. So the good news is that not that many people heard Rudy Giuliani, but the point is well taken. And I honestly believe, go back and watch the last 5 days on our air. This is a constant drumbeat from our anchors, from our guests, calling this out and telling the truth. It's also important why we need to, as I keep saying, continue to tell the story of the Biden transition, and to try to bring some normalcy to the process that is certainly in a extraordinarily abnormal year and situation. But we have to keep marching forward with what the true story of what happened is. So I think that's what we're doing every single day. We got this is running long. Go ahead.
Sorry, it's just David. Just to sort of add a finer point to Rick's point, I think maybe a different angle, because Cynthia's right with the echo chamber we're in. There are people who are making a lot of money off of this disinformation, and primarily it's the Murdoch family. And I think, that ought to be connected to all this mumbo jumbo. Last week, I think it was the former Prime Minister of Australia, Malcolm Turnbull, just eviscerated the head of Fox Corp in Australia. on this very issue. And I think that's fair game. And I think we ought to be bringing that into discussion.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm going to move on. If anybody has anything else, we can bring it up at the end. But Laura, do you have anything else from domestic? I don't think so, right? Or do you?
Just two quick notes. The bond hearing today continues for the suspects in the Ahmaud Arbery case, and tomorrow 4 astronauts will lift off from Cape Canaveral via SpaceX in the vehicle Resilience. Any other year, we would be paying much more attention to this launch, but we'll have Rachel Crane there tomorrow, and that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to international.
Hey, Michael. So I'll try to keep it short, but Russia, Germany, and the UK all recording the highest number of infections in a single day. The Irish government is also advising the citizens now not to book flights home for Christmas, very telling. So we've got Plykin, Chance, and Nick on those lines reporting from their date lines. Melissa Bell has a package from Paris comparing Europe's lockdown with the second lighter lockdown as cases climb. Some glimmers of hope in some of the data, but overall, Europe still faces a long, dark winter. Ivan Watson had all of the Asia COVID lines today, Japan hitting the highest number of cases since the start of the pandemic, Seoul launching a rapid response team to enforce mask wearing, and some videos coming out from India as they tee up to celebrate Diwali this coming weekend. It's another holiday featuring thousands normally that experts fear could cause a COVID spike. Ottman is also reporting on the now 6 positive cases found on the first Caribbean cruise since the pandemic began, one that was meant to serve as a model for how to operate cruise ships during a pandemic. And then I just want to add, we've got Ivan also up live for whoever wants on China, coming out overnight and formally congratulating President-elect Biden. So he can tackle that as well. And that's where we start.
Okay, thanks, Penny. Business.
Michael, good morning. We'll start with those sobering comments from Fed Chair Jerome Powell that Virginia just mentioned, dragging down markets yesterday at a virtual panel. He warned that the growing COVID cases, no stimulus, and said the economy as we know it was probably a thing of the past. Of course, it's all about the rising cases. Just before this meeting, I was watching New York Fed President John Williams at a forum with the FT, and he echoed that. He said the very large rise in COVID cases puts a major question mark on the ability for the economy to weather this period. And of course, you know, the other question mark is stimulus. Prospects for stimulus fading, as Virginia mentioned. Democrats and Republicans still disagree over size and details. And of course, as you mentioned, those 12 million Americans who still haven't gotten stimulus checks, they are likely the ones most in need. Katie LaBosco's got a great write on that, and Romans has been up on it this morning. But the big question remains, is there the political will to get a stimulus deal done? And can President-elect Biden's report, longtime Senate colleagues, do the trick? So she's up on that. Michael, on TV and digital, we're tracking some really strong corporate stories as we monitor the surge in coronavirus cases. Deutsche Bank saying that employees that were working in the office have now been instructed to go home again in places like the Americas, especially here in New York City. Also anticipating a rush of shoppers. Big leading grocery chains like Kroger and H-E-B in Texas are reimposing limits on items such as toilet paper and paper towels. Christina Alessi is up and available on all those threads. And as we know, airline carriers have been struggling to drum up revenue and keep their costs down. Well, now JetBlue Airways announcing that it will get rid of those empty seats and sell all of them on flights starting January 8th. Pete Montine available on that. In tech, Donny O'Sullivan, sources telling Donny O'Sullivan that Mark Zuckerberg telling Facebook staff at a company meeting yesterday that Steve Bannon, after suggesting that Fauci and Ray should be beheaded, was not enough of a violation to permanently suspend him from the platform. Worth noting that Twitter last week did permanently suspend him. Donny O'Sullivan is up on that. And lastly, in media, Fox telling Brian Stelter that they believe media empire could be bigger under Biden. Fox employees confident that Biden will lead to prosperity at the network, and they're not losing any sleep over Trump's threatening of a Trump TV, sources telling him. Donny O'Sullivan also had some great video that I alerted earlier of Trump supporters at rallies saying that Fox News was simply too liberal for them, preferring the likes of OANN and Newsmax. And that is where we begin.
Okay, thanks, Richard. Anything else from Washington?
Nothing for me.
Okay, does anybody have anything on any of this before we move on? Okay, digital.
Good morning. We had 40.3 million uniques yesterday, many strong performers, 13 pieces over 1 million uniques. James Lankford saying he would step in if Biden doesn't have access to intel briefings by Friday had over 3 million. Stephen Collinson analysis, Trump's stunning abdication of leadership comes as pandemic worsens, over 2 million. And dejected, Trump continues to waffle over waging baseless election fight from Caitlin Collins, Kevin Liptak, and Jim Acosta had over 2 million as well, and rounds out our top three from yesterday. It's also worth noting this piece was our top for consumption time with about 6 minutes average per user unique reading this piece. Currently, analysis from Mae Breston and Stephen Collinson is topping the charts. That's got over 17,000 concurrent. We have, and the headline is Trump's GOP wall cracking as he fights election results. We've got over 7 our president. Also, our projection that Biden had won Arizona. And a piece on Jerome Powell saying the economy as we knew it is over rounds out our top three this morning. Today on the transition of power, we have a good one from Zach Wolf that gives us a good what we know with the headline Trump's endgame comes into view. And another good one on the GOP seeing Trump's election challenges as likely to fail and urges the White House to take steps toward transition. And Trump's eldest children split on his path forward. Elsewhere on the election, we have a good one coming, looking at the new demographics of the record number of women coming into Congress. On coronavirus, we have the latest with the shocking numbers in the U.S. Soon we'll have an essay from Sanjay on the pandemic becoming a humanitarian disaster in the U.S., which is also the topic of the Fact versus Fiction podcast. We have a really good global comparison piece from Emma Reynolds, which also sparked a lot of discussion during our morning meeting. As schools shut across the U.S., Europe made it a mission to keep them open. One that's doing well on home pages this morning, a nurse with COVID sends message to his family hours before dying. We have time is running out for millions of Americans who still haven't gotten stimulus checks. A piece, Katie Labasco takes us through the latest there. And I'll stop there today.
Okay. Thanks very much. John Antonio.
Good morning, Michael. So obviously leading with all the transition chaos, putting a big light on the reporting that came out about the DHS, saying it's the most secure election. I'm going to couple that with the reporting that came out within the past hour that the law firm representing Trump in the Pennsylvania case is pulling out, showing a growing discomfort and defending this, which is very telling. Kristen Holmes is handling both of those headlines for us, and we'll be hitting them hard all day long. We do have Ben Ginsburg on that coming up next hour. With John King, we do have the New Mexico Secretary of State, who's part of that coordinating council that worked with the DHS to put out that statement. It was a bunch of locals and state officials in the DHS coming together to put out that most secure election statement, which is certainly not what Trump wants to hear and defies everything that he's been saying. John Harwood and Caitlin Collins stay at the White House. Going to continue to hit the mood there. The Trump children split. And we'll see where Trump is going. John Avalon and David Challian at the magic wall. Biden sews up Arizona, adding 11 more electoral votes, and we'll see where the vote count stands in both North Carolina and Georgia, as well as the popular vote. MJ Lee in Wilmington, actually in Rehoboth Beach, where Biden's on vacation. The China piece, Ron Klain speaking out, warning the transition lag is going to hurt the COVID response. Manu Raju on the Hill, we'll see if more GOPers crack and join that growing list from yesterday. And then we do have Alex Mark ready to go. We're on Gina Haspel watch. We'll see if there's any news there and if she gets cut. And we'll go into rolling coverage if and when that happens. Jim Sciutto has Mike Rogers and Robert Cardillo, both Florida's potential members of Biden's administration and the intel community. Just Art of the Deal ghostwriter Tony Schwartz on. With Brianna, a booking, Michael, that you actually flagged, a consortium of CEOs willing to go public if Trump tries to disrupt the electoral process. They're staying quiet right now, but they're ready to go up and make a big think about that for fear of what it could do to the economy. Yale management professor Jeffrey Sonnenfeld leads that group. We have him booked with Brianna to talk about that. And then Brooke has Douglas Brinkley. Amber Walker is at a recounting location in Gwinnett County, Georgia. The certification deadline is in just 1 week. We want to stay on that as well. The other story we're hitting is coronavirus. growing restrictions across the country as the cases and hospitalizations keep going up. Adrian Broadus on the 30-day lockdown in Chicago. Lucy Kaffenoff in Salt Lake City on the hospitals filling up coast to coast. Nick Watt with the 3 COVID rappies. Elizabeth Cohen on the alarming new death numbers with that new modeling that came out. And some bookings to flag. The mayor of Newark, where there's a nearly 1 in 5 positivity rate coming up this show. California's health secretary, where the state just hit 1 million cases, and we're seeing more counties roll back, put more restrictions in place. And one of the New York City city commissioners who's calling on schools to shut down there.
Okay. Thank you, John. Washington.
Morning. At 4 o'clock, we've got Caitlin on Trump and Jessica on Biden, and we'll cover all the news discussed on this call, including we'll watch for Haspel News, and Jackie Spear from Intel is also booked for us, and we'll mobilize if that happens even further. Erica Hill has our coronavirus wrap, and we've got Sanjay, of course. Sarah Murray is looking at the vaccine distribution challenges, and Dr. Richard Besser as well out of that, and of course, as mentioned, the Drew Griffin spot on Stop the Stealing.
And in the Situation Room, we'll stay on top of all the latest COVID developments, cases, hospitalizations, all setting new records, the new projection from the IHME, the latest vaccine news. We'll break it all down with our doctors as well as our wrap pieces. We do have former Surgeon General Vivek Murthy booked. He's one of the co-chairs of Biden's coronavirus task force. Obviously, a lot to talk to him about, including Ron Klain's comments on MSNBC last night about a COVID coordinator and a national mask mandate. We'll also stay on top of all the latest transition threads. We'll see if we get any news out of the Biden camp today, and we'll see if we hear anything from the president as he gets briefed on Operation Warp Speed at noon. We'll make sure to keep using the Obama sound. We do have and Jessica Dean covering Biden for us. We have Tom Friedman and former White House Chief of Staff Andy Card booked. Obviously, a lot to talk to them about. We'll be ready to go if Haspel does end up getting fired. We have Andrew McCabe and Director Clapper on the hook. And we have Sarah Murray's piece on distribution of the vaccine, what the plan is, and how much confusion there is surrounding that plan. And that's where we start.
Okay. Thanks, Kurt. Does anybody have anything else for today before we move to the weekend? Okay. McConish.
Good morning. So we'll be covering the coronavirus surge, a president with little interest in addressing it, Biden's plan to contain it. Are we looking at additional lockdowns? On the presidential transition, this will all come to an end. What will that look like? What can we expect in the next 30 days? We have CNN election law analyst Richard Hassan, and the squad has stayed strong, all winning re-election. We have Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. How do they plan on supporting and working with Joe Biden? Omar has said she would not be okay with Biden appointing any Republicans to his cabinet. And Oregon voters passed groundbreaking drug law reform, decriminalizing small amounts of cocaine, heroin, OxyContin, methamphetamines. We have Morgan Godwin. She supports this. She wrote a piece in the Washington Post. My friend and I both took heroin. He overdosed. Why was I charged with his death? After spending 4.5 years in prison, she's now a member of the Oregon Alcohol and Drug Policy Commission. So kind of controversial, but we'll be doing that. That's where we start.
Okay, thank you. Tomorrow night, we will be airing an updated version of the Biden candidate doc, Joe Biden's Long Journey. Jim, do you just want to tell people what the update entails?
Yes. In this version of Joe Biden's life story, he actually wins the presidential election, and that's reflected in a bunch of updates through the 2 hours, and it's a really beautiful look at his life's journey from Gloria and Michelle.
Yes, it's a terrific doc from Gloria and Michelle and the doc team. As it aired previously, they've done a lot of work this week to update it, which we thank them for. And please, when you're discussing Biden, the president-elect, his transition, et cetera, if you can push the doc tomorrow night at 10, that would be much appreciated. Inside Politics.
Good morning. We're going to look at the political limbo in Washington with Michael Shear, Caitlin Collins, and NPR's Asma Khalid. how the Biden transition is moving forward without any Trump concession or cooperation, the early personnel picks, and the policy demands we're already hearing from the left wing of the party. And on the Trump side, we'll look at the lies the president is telling about the election results. Does he have any kind of legal endgame in mind, or is he just trying to salt the earth ahead of Biden taking over? And when will we see more Republicans acknowledge that Biden won? And on COVID, we're looking at the stunningly bad numbers and why it matters that the president seems to be ignoring it lately. We're working on booking a member of Biden's task force to talk about their preparations, and that's where we start.
Okay, thank you. State of the Union.
Hey there. We are honestly still sorting through our guests because we're waiting for a bunch of answers, but we're working with the Biden transition and talking to a couple Republican governors. We're going to be focusing on COVID and the increasing dangers the country is facing as Biden is prevented from beginning a proper transition. For the end of the show, we do also have Reverend Raphael Warnock, so we'll talk to him about his race in Georgia, all the money that's flooding in there, and some of the attacks that Republicans are already leveling at him. And we should hopefully have updates on our other headliners shortly.
Okay, thanks, Abigail. GPS.
Good morning. Thanks, Michael. We have a series of people who served in high levels in Republican administrations, including Trump's own, to talk about Trump's refusal to accept the truth and the real-life consequences of that. At the moment, we have H.R. McMaster on how our allies and enemies around the world are viewing this. Michael Chertoff, who you will remember was a U.S. attorney and judge before he headed DHS on the legal and homeland security issues around the president's lies. And Peggy Noonan, Reagan's speechwriter, on the cultural issues around the fallacy and what this does to an already divided America. We have one more slot we're trying to fill. And Fareed has a great take comparing the president's actions to how a corrosive and sticky lie about the German surrender in World War I in 1918 led to the rise of Hitler.
Okay. Can't wait for that. Reliable sources.
Yeah, that's tough to follow. We're going to spend a lot of time, what we talked about on this meeting a lot, the disinformation campaign, the deadly consequences, and right-wing media's role in all this, who are the major offenders of that. And that'll segue into what's going on with sort of the war against Fox, both from the president and the upstarts Newsmax and OAN. We'll get a little into COVID, and we'll also look at Biden's press strategy.
Okay, thanks, John. Does anybody have anything else before we go?
Hey, Michael, it's Mitra. Can you hear me?
Hi, Mitra. Go ahead.
Hi. I wasn't going to say anything, but my advice to the digital meeting just now is to press *6 more often and speak up. So I want to be true to that. Today's my last day at CNN, and I just want you all to know how grateful and proud I am to have been here for 5 years. And I'm leaving to go launch my own company focused on community news. I'm super excited, but of course, I'm also really sad. And I wasn't going to say something, but I thought this might be a nice way to end this week to maybe be a leader who can exit with grace, which seems like everyone on the call might want right about now. So thank you. And thank you, Michael, just personally for your partnership and friendship and allowing me to derail the meeting. I promise it's the last time.
Well, Mitra, I'm glad you pressed *6, and we will miss you very much, and we wish you all the very, very, very best. Thank you for everything you contributed. We really appreciate it.
Hear, hear.
Thank you.
And I will end by saying that Mitra's first thing she said about press *6 more often is really important. Please do. Everybody have a great day, and I will talk to you later.